waited until Russia lowered its guard, then hit Moscow with its largest drone strike of the war.
11:30 p.m. on the outskirts of Moscow. Air raid sirens echo across the western districts as radar screens inside a Pantsir air defense battery light up with an alarming sight. Over 45 fast-moving micro-targets materializing out of nowhere. Just 5 hours earlier, at around 6:20 p.m., Russia had launched a large-scale strike on Ukraine's power grid. More than 110 missiles and UAVs were fired, plunging parts of Kyiv into darkness for nearly half a day. Russian state television quickly switched into victory mode, analysts laughing and applauding the successful punishment strike. What no one in Moscow realized was that this celebration had triggered something far worse: Ukraine's most ambitious retaliatory operation ever aimed at the Russian capital. Roughly 28 kilometers from Moscow, a covert Ukrainian special forces team had been waiting for this exact moment. Their disguise was unremarkable: a beat-up potato delivery truck, heavily modified on the inside into a mobile drone launch station. Operators sat in the dim green glow of their laptops, monitoring every movement of Russian defenses. At 10:58 p.m., a soft electronic chime sounded. The Ukrainian team leader gave a small nod. Side panels on the truck slid open, and one by one, 48-inch Calibri FPV drones were tossed gently into the cold night air. For a brief moment, they hovered like a disturbed swarm of insects, then snapped into formation and accelerated toward the distant lights of Moscow. These drones were not the real strike force. They were bait. Their mission was simple and brutally effective: force Russia's top-tier air defenses to burn through expensive missiles, overwhelm their threat assessment systems, and create a false sense of victory. By 11:30 p.m., Moscow's layered defenses began reacting exactly as Ukraine predicted. Operators of S-400 and S-500 batteries saw the small drones as easy targets: crude, amateurish, even desperate. Confident in a quick kill, a Russian commander authorized an immediate engagement. Moments later, missiles worth millions of dollars ignited and roared into the sky. For Ukraine, this wasn't a setback. It was the ideal opening move. The night of chaos over Moscow had officially begun. If this opening move surprised you, comment your thoughts and subscribe to follow the next phases of the operation. The first wave of Calibri drones had barely crossed the defensive perimeter when the response from Moscow's air defense network intensified. Inside multiple S-400 command posts, operators watched their radar scopes suddenly fill with dozens of small returns. The targets looked crude, inconsistent, and almost harmless, exactly what the Ukrainians wanted them to believe the engagement order had already been given. Now the waste began. Massive 40 N-7 interceptor missiles, each worth more than a luxury car fleet, blasted into the sky at hypersonic speed. Their shockwaves tore apart over 20 of the decoy drones instantly. Russian crews celebrated the clean kills, convinced the threat had been neutralized. On paper, it looked like a flawless performance, but this was only the first trap. The surviving Calibri drones pushed deeper toward the city, drifting into the engagement range of Moscow's Pantsir S-1 batteries, the workhorses of urban defense. As they closed in, Ukrainian operators initiated the second phase of their deception. With a single command, the drone's tiny transmitters shifted their electronic fingerprints. What had looked like cheap FPV units now suddenly mimicked the radar signature of larger cruise missiles or low-flying rotorcraft. Inside Pantsir control cabins, the mood flipped instantly. Algorithms flagged the new signals as high-priority threats. Human operators, trained to trust the system and act fast, had no time to question the sudden change. Radios crackled with rushed commands. A moment later, the batteries unleashed their own storm. Dozens of 9M335 missiles streaked upward in a chaotic barrage, filling the night sky with fiery trails. The Pantsirs weren't shooting at real drones anymore. They were firing at digital ghosts. Ukrainian spoofing software had fed their sensors a nightmare of false data, and the system responded exactly as designed. Shoot first, understand later. Within 90 seconds, the air defense sector was nearly silent again. The final Calibri drones were blown apart, raining harmless debris into the forests outside the city. inside the Russian bunker, officers looked at their now clear radar screens with relief. They believed they had just defeated Ukraine's attack. They couldn't have been more wrong. The Pantsirs had burned through almost half of their missile reserves. The S-400 units had already devoured a fortune. Moscow's supposedly impenetrable shield had just exhausted a significant portion of its ammunition on decoys. And Ukraine hadn't even shown its real strike force yet. What do you think about Russia burning millions on decoys? Share your opinion and subscribe for the next chapter of the strike. The destruction of the last Calibri decoys marked the moment Moscow believed it had secured the night. Inside Russian command posts, voices grew more confident. Reports flowed upward claiming full neutralization of the threat. Screens were clear and operators were preparing to stand down. But the Ukrainians had timed everything precisely. The silence over Moscow was not the end of the attack. It was the gap between the trap and the real strike. Hundreds of kilometers away, a different formation of Ukrainian drones had already been in the air for nearly 2 hours. These were not the flimsy FPV units tossed from a truck. They were long-range Lutyi-class attack drones, each with far greater endurance, payload capacity, and onboard autonomy. Unlike the Calibri swarm, the Lutyis had taken a wide, looping route far from the decoy corridor. Flying at low altitude, they used terrain folds and industrial pipelines as natural cover, staying below Russia's radar horizon. Their engines hummed steadily as they followed a pre-programmed approach vector aimed at the western flank of Moscow's defenses. As they neared the outer perimeter, the swarm began its slow climb. Russian radar stations began picking them up, first as faint echoes, then as an expanding cluster. Inside the central command bunker, the tone of the room shifted instantly. 45 decoys were one thing. 60 armed drones appearing simultaneously from a different direction was something else entirely. Operators scrambled to reassign defensive sectors. The Pantsir batteries were still depleted and mid-reload. S-400 units had exhausted much of their ready ammunition. That left the Tor M2 batteries, positioned across critical approach routes to shoulder the immediate burden. The Tor crews responded with speed and discipline. Their radars locked onto the leading wave of Lutyis, and missiles snapped upward in rapid succession. Explosions dotted the darkness as drone after drone was torn apart mid-air. The Ukrainian strike group was shrinking fast. 56 drones, then 48. Then 40 Ukrainian operators watching remotely could feel the pressure building. This phase of the mission was expected to be costly, but not this costly. If too many drones fell before reaching the next defensive ring, the entire operation could collapse. Still, the swarm pressed forward, absorbing the losses. Each downed drone bought time and space for the survivors to push deeper. Every kilometer mattered. Every second mattered. By the time the Lutyis crossed into the range of Russia's heavy electronic warfare platforms, 26 drones remained, battered, scattered, but still moving. The real test was about to begin. Did Ukraine's multi-layer deception impress you? Leave a comment and subscribe to see how the real strike unfolds. As the last wreckage of the decoy drones disappeared from the sky, Russian air defense crews felt a momentary calm. Radar scopes were clear. The frantic missile launches had stopped. Commanders were preparing to report a successful defense until their screens abruptly filled with new contacts. This time, there were 60 of them, larger, faster, flying in a coordinated pattern. These weren't decoys. They were the real strike package, Ukraine's long-range Lutyi attack drones, launched 2 hours earlier from across the border. For the first few minutes, Russia's reaction was disorganized. The Pantsir units were still reloading. Several crews were physically carrying new missile canisters into position. The S-400 batteries had already depleted a significant portion of their ready-to-fire interceptors. Moscow's air defense net, normally layered and synchronized, was now forced to rely heavily on the Tor M2 systems, the last reliable line of medium-range protection. The Tor batteries rose to the challenge immediately. Their radars locked onto the first wave of Lutyis, and missiles roared into the sky. One drone exploded, then another, then a dozen more. In less than 2 minutes, over 30 Ukrainian drones were turned into falling debris. Tor crews worked with relentless precision, their systems proving why they were considered one of Russia's most effective defensive assets. For a moment, it seemed like the attack might fail. Ukrainian operators watched their drone count drop rapidly. 40 remaining, then 35, then less than 30. The math was turning brutal. They knew they could not afford to lose many more, not if the strike was going to reach Moscow's critical fuel infrastructure. But Ukraine had prepared for the next move. As the surviving drones continued forward, the Kremlin activated its most powerful countermeasure, the Krasuka-4 electronic warfare system. A massive surge of radio energy swept across the airspace, saturating frequencies and drowning every remaining video feed. Ukrainian screens dissolved into static, telemetry vanished. Command links dropped simultaneously. For most drone fleets, this would have meant instant defeat. But the Lutyis weren't flying like conventional aircraft anymore. Their onboard processors automatically shifted into swarm autonomy mode, forming a synchronized digital nervous system in midair. Instead of collapsing, the formation tightened. Each drone recalculated its position using inertial sensors, cross signals, and the last shared GPS data. To Russian operators, it looked impossible the jamming wall had not broken the swarm. If anything, it had made it more focused. The real danger was now closing in. Modern warfare is changing fast. Tell us your take on swarm drones and subscribe to follow the final stages of the attack. The moment the Lutyis pushed through the wall of Russian jamming, Moscow's final defensive ring was already preparing for the worst. The Krasuka-4 had blinded most of the Ukrainian swarm, but it hadn't broken it. The drones continued forward, disorganized, damaged, but undeniably still in the fight. Of the original 60, only 6 drones managed to slip through the chaos and enter the outskirts of Moscow's defensive heartland. Their flight paths were unstable, their video feeds frozen or corrupted, but their inertial systems kept them moving toward their last assigned targets. At this stage, there were no more long-range interceptors left to deploy. The S-400s had exhausted their ready missiles. Several Pantsir units had completely drained their launch canisters. Russia's most advanced jammers had already failed to collapse the swarm. That left Moscow with one remaining option: raw firepower. Along the western suburbs, the final layer of Pantsir S-1 units activated their 30mm rotary cannons, the last line of defense when everything else has failed. Bright lines of tracers cut across the night sky as the cannons unleashed sustained bursts. It wasn't precision fire, it was a wall of metal. 4 of the 6 drones flew straight into the storm and were shredded instantly. Their fragments scattered across wooded areas outside the city, leaving only smoke trails behind. But 2 drones survived, barely. Both were damaged, trailing smoke, their stabilization systems fighting to keep them airborne. Yet somehow, they crossed the final defensive radius and began descending toward their primary objectives: a major jet fuel pumping station at Sheremetevo Airport, and a secondary distribution node of the Transneft oil pipeline in Zelenograd. With only seconds left, Ukrainian operators regained a flicker of connection, just enough to send one final correction command. The drones didn't need a perfect hit, they only needed proximity. The first drone broke apart mid-descent, crashing directly onto the fuel station's control module. The warhead detonated with a contained but critical blast, triggering emergency foam systems and shutting down the entire refueling network. The second drone smashed into the pipeline node, rupturing a feeder line and igniting a compact but highly visible fire. Automatic valves slammed shut, halting the flow of thousands of barrels. 2 drones, 2 hits, both targets neutralized. For Moscow, the night was no longer about defense. It was now about containing the damage. 2 drones breaking through Moscow's entire defense. What's your reaction? Comment below and subscribe for the conclusion. As firefighters raced to contain the burning pipeline and airport engineers struggled to restart the crippled refueling system, the broader implications of the attack were already spreading far beyond Moscow. The operational impact was immediate. At Sheremetevo, one of Russia's busiest airports, all fueling operations were halted. Flights were grounded for over 2 hours, sending delays rippling through Europe's interconnected air traffic network. Airlines scrambled to reroute aircraft, and dozens of departures were eventually canceled. In Zelenograd, the Transneft pipeline node entered full emergency lockdown. Pumps shut down, pressure valves sealed, and an entire section of Russia's western fuel distribution grid went offline. While the damage was not catastrophic, the interruption was costly and symbolically devastating. In the Russian command bunker, the mood shifted from triumph to disbelief. They had intercepted 98 out of 100 drones, a number that would normally be called a flawless success. Yet the two that slipped through had caused the very outcome Ukraine wanted: the shutdown of vital infrastructure, panic in the capital, and a global showcase of Russia's vulnerabilities. Meanwhile, the cost comparison told an even harsher truth. Russia had spent an estimated over $60 million firing hypersonic interceptors and dozens of Pantsir and Tor missiles. Add in the disruption of airport operations, the temporary shutdown of part of the pipeline network, and emergency response costs. The total damage escalated to well over $250 million. Ukraine's entire operation, including the Special Forces team, the Calibri decoys, and the long-range Lutyis, cost around $2.3 million, a 100-to-1 return on impact. It was asymmetric warfare at its most refined. Intelligence, timing, deception, and precision beating hardware, budgets, and brute force. International reactions were swift. European leaders praised the ingenuity of Ukraine's drone program. Defense analysts worldwide highlighted the attack as a milestone in 21st century warfare, proof that unmanned swarms could outmaneuver even the most expensive layered defense systems. Funding pledges increased. New technology partnerships were proposed overnight. For the Kremlin, it was a sobering reminder that the war was no longer contained at the front, that the illusion of safety within Moscow's borders was just that, an illusion. The capital had been struck again, and it had taken only 2 drones to do it. Do you think asymmetric drone warfare will reshape future conflicts? Share your thoughts and subscribe for more strategic breakdowns.